Good is not good enough today. You have to be great. We give you 5 seconds at most. And don't complain about me to give you 5 seconds, because the kid at home gives you 5 seconds.
Yes.
And talk about the short attention span theater. They don't really have short attention spans, okay? They just have incredible shit detectors.
Well, good morning, folks, and welcome to RenmanMusicandBusiness.com. My name is Steve Rennie, and I am the Renman, and this program is called Renman Live. If you've not watched this before, let me tell you what we're up to. Each week, we're getting together with some of the smartest, most talented, most successful people in the music business to talk about today's music business. Our guest today is music industry analyst and blogger Bob Lefsetz, whose Lefsetz Letter has fueled countless conversations about the state of the music business, and amongst both the industry professionals and the artist hopefuls out there. But before we get started today, as we pile through a couple of faux pas right out of the box, I want to introduce you to my Renman Live team who are over there trying to make it all right. On the keyboards, over in the corner is my right-hand man. He's a graduate of USC Music Industry Program. We call him the Trojan Man. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Cody Ramnes over there. To his right is the latest addition to our Renman Live team. He is also a member of the USC Thornton School of Music Industry Program. Today he'll be presiding over the chat room and answering the phone. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome Mr. Evan Renne. Now do your bow. All right. These Trojan guys are not short on confidence and showbiz instincts, I'll say that. And finally, I'd like to do a shout out to our social media manager. I was going to say Maven, but that probably doesn't work. Who currently resides in South Carolina, but against my best advice, he's now packing the moving van today and on his way to California, so you'll be able to see him in person shortly. Today, folks, is our 119th episode of Renman Live, against all odds. What makes our show unique, I hope, is that the viewers, you folks out there watching, are encouraged to be part of the conversation today. Now, if you've watched our show before, you know what to do. If not, let me give you a quick guide on how you can be a part of it. First, if you're the shy type, you can post your question in the chat room. Hopefully, you're watching on the Renman Live website right now. If you're on YouTube, I want you to come over to RenmanMB.com and click the Live tab so you can be a part of this. If you got a question, post it right there in the chat room, and Evan will do his best to take the great questions and move them up to the front of the class here. If you are old school, or you want to move to the front of the class big time, I suggest you call in our hotline, 310-469-9067. For all you folks that have been sending me these emails to ask Bob about this, I suggest you man up and ask him yourself. Call on the phone today. And if you do that today, I'm going to give you a free copy of our Renman U solo course about how to get involved in the music. It's called Renman U, our insider's guide to today's music. But we'll give you that for free as a little inspiration for helping us out today. Okay, let's get down to business. Our guest today has been one of the most prolific and outspoken commentators on today's music business for a very long time now. His Lefsetz Letter, if you're not familiar, is one of the most widely read blogs in today's music business. His opinions have riled up some of the biggest players and companies in today's music business. You may not always agree with our guest today, Bob, but his opinions are guaranteed to spark a little passion and debate, and that's why he's back here today. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome my good friend, Mr. Bob Lefsetz. We're going that in there. There you go. All right.
Camera here.
Oh yeah, you
got a big investment here.
We got a big investment here. We got, I love gadgets, and I know you do too.
Oh, that's very cool. That moving camera here at home. For those of you at home, you can't see it, but
you know what they call that, Bob? The one-man crew. The one-man crew without payroll, without welfare, without insurance. I mean, we love it, and it works every time. First off, let me say I want to thank you for joining us again. We've had a couple of repeat visitors here of lately, only the really good ones.
Who else has been repeat?
Jason Flom,
okay,
a man who's known to have some opinions and quite a funny guy. Who else did we have? We had Nicole Alvarez, who's just an old buddy of mine, and so it's. Aaron Bay Shook came back, volunteered one day. We're out playing golf. He said, Ren, I'm in the teaching mode again. And so he came along as well. So first off, I want to say thanks for joining us here again. I know you got better things to do. What have you been up to? Seems like you've been traveling a lot, Bob.
Yeah, well, I didn't expect a question
Oslo,
like that.
Heathrow.
I was in Oslo. Yeah, it was very interesting because I spent a lot of time with the MD. That's what they call basically the chairman of the president in Europe of both Universal and Warner. And it was very interesting because Spotify has been in that market since 2009. And of course, this is before the YouTube revolution. So physical's dead there. They make all their money from streaming, and I heard a lot about what's going on. One of the fascinating things...
We're going to talk about that.
Yeah, one of the fascinating things the MD of Universal was telling me, he used to sell a breadth of material, but it's all narrowed down to pop. He's just telling me what happened. This is not, let me be clear. Don't shoot the messenger. This is what they're saying.
These are stats,
he doesn't want to sell jazz. He doesn't want to sell this. And he made another really interesting point. This guy's a great guy.
Who was the guy you met with?
The guy's name's Petter. Mm-hmm. So he's the head of MD of Universal. He said, okay, I go home, I come home from work, maybe I'll play 5 or 6 tracks. He has a son who's a teenager. He's playing music all afternoon. And what people don't realize, in the old days, what would happen is if someone bought a record, the act was paid. It didn't matter whether the person played it or not. Well, now you get paid on listens. Yeah. So if you go home and you say, how come my act is not rich? How much did you actually listen to the overall pot of Spotify?
Yeah. Well, you know what? We're going to talk a whole lot about that because it's one of the big subjects today, and all of these things that we're going to talk about. It's funny, when I was sitting here the last couple of days trying to get together, run a show, and thinking about what we talk about, I thought, Jesus, man, the answer is obvious. Just go through the last 2-3 weeks of the Lefsetz Letter, where you talk about all kinds of different things, some music business related, some not, right? We'll talk about that a little bit later too. But the issue that comes up everywhere now, whether you're on an airplane, whether you're in the boardroom at Universal, whether you're on the golf course playing with your buddies going, hey, what about this whole streaming thing, right? It's one of the single most talked about things. I also think it's one of the most least understood, all the nuances of the conversation. So it polarizes people, both artists and professionals, very quickly. And of course, so we're talking about streaming. So on the one hand, you have this one group of folks who claim that it's killing the music business, right? That's at one end of the spectrum. On the other hand, you have folks who believe it's what consumers want, and isn't that how you build a successful business, and that adopting this streaming model will ultimately make for a bigger and better music business. So before we dive into all the nuance, I wanted to ask you a simple question, which I try to get across to folks here. If I ask you, Bob, what is the single biggest issue for artists today in today's music business? Is it getting paid or getting heard?
Getting heard by 1,000. I was just watching John Oliver last night. We're
he's
live.
Great, by the way. This is all live.
Okay, so I want to say, you may be watching 3 years from now. I go, what the hell is this guy talking about?
Well, they'll be watching.
But John Oliver was killing. I'm lying on my floor. I have to do these back exercises. Got a bad back, and I can't believe how good he is. Everybody's talking about Saturday Night Live. This guy is far beyond Saturday Night Live. Now, on one hand, if you go back to 1975 when SNL launched, there were 3 networks. So a John Oliver could never get on. This is just like musicians today. You say, I can't be heard. Well, in the old days, you wouldn't have a computer, you wouldn't have Pro Tools, you wouldn't be able to make it, you wouldn't have TuneCores, you get on these services, you'd be out of the game bitching that you couldn't get a deal. No one would be able to hear you because there was no social media. But as good as John Oliver is, and I certainly know last season, he's just started his 2nd season, they posted full episodes on YouTube. So you can watch them for free. He's not the biggest guy in America. It's just mind-blowing, because I'm sitting there.
He might be one of the funniest, though.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. One of the best, absolutely. But there's so much noise that, we always hear what's going on Saturday Night Live. I don't even catch the clips on Saturday Night Live. Used to be a couple of years ago, well, if there were highlights, if there were highlights, we get a little,
we're gonna let them run the show, Bob. We're going to vibe here.
As I say, there were highlights, and I'd say, I got to watch them. I don't even watch them, but John Oliver I watch. So Is it about staying in the marketplace an incredibly long time, such that John Oliver will be anointed amongst the 300 million people in America? Or inherently, is there a ceiling? I have some thoughts about that. I mean, Ben Cesario in the New York Times wrote an article the other day talking about that if you look at streaming numbers, hip-hop is larger than sales. I think he was reacting to an article that I wrote the week before, which is if you go to Spotify and you go to the pure listens, which is not a manipulated chart whatsoever, some of these acts have 3, 5, 7 tracks in the top 100. So the big might get bigger.
Hold that thought for a second, because it's a great bit of conversation that helps, I think, illuminate the whole of the issue of streaming and takes it out of this emotional zone. When I was putting together our run of show, it occurred to me that I should just quote you. It's the season of politics. We're not getting in any trouble here today, Bob. This is all G-rated stuff today.
I'm girding myself.
If you were Donald Trump, you'd have a lot to answer for. Yours is a lot better. There was one that you posted in an article called "The Rich Get Richer," which I want Cody to show up there. Let's show that clip, then we'll or that graphic there, Code. The rich get false sense is what this is, I think, right? We dubbed them all. Here's your quote. But just because the barrier to entry is so low in music, that doesn't mean that you will gain attention. It's easier than ever to play. It's harder than ever to get noticed. This is not the way it was supposed to be. The internet was supposed to level the playing field, let the cream rise to the top, allow everybody to begin from the same starting line, and let the best man win. My question is this, Bob. Has the internet created a false sense of entitlement for artists in general?
For everybody. Everybody thinks they should be famous today. But you're just right. And there's almost nothing more to say. But
Bob, if we go into nothing more to say, it's going to fuck up my whole plan here.
But I got plenty to say. But on this particular topic, okay, everyone thought they were entitled to be famous. Everybody was getting, we've been through so many things online. Everybody was going to have a blog. Then people wrote blogs and realized no one was paying attention. Then everybody was going to be on Twitter. Everybody was tweeting, no one's paying attention, okay? So people ultimately get frustrated and stop because they realize no one is listening. As far as the rabble-rousers with music, the difference before, this is about 8 years ago, I go to Canadian Music Week, and they had there was an A&R guy there, and he said, good is not good enough today. You have to be great. And I was talking to people working at labels. This might have been in Norway too. We give you 5 seconds at most. And don't complain about me to give you 5 seconds, because the kid at home gives you 5 seconds.
Yes.
And talk about the short attention span theater. They don't really have short attention spans, okay? They just have incredible shit detectors, okay? It's like, no, yes, okay? It's like I'm listening to the satellite when I'm not listening to Howard Stern. I press the button until I find something that appeals to me. So you have to create something that good. What I love is the email saying, why don't you listen to this 5 or 10 times? Are you fucking nuts?
Are you fucking kidding me?
Even 5-year-olds are overscheduled. I have a life. I'm not going to listen. It's not like the old days when I would go to Corvettes. I would save up and spend $344 for an album in stereo. Couldn't buy another album for 3 or 4 weeks. I would plan out what I was going to buy, and I would play it till I knew it by heart. Those days don't exist.
Yeah. It's funny, you don't have kids, do you?
No.
We have kids here, and it's evidence to what you talk about, that your shit detectors, our first big quote for the day, Evan, write that one down. The kids today, attention span, they have opinions. They're all Bob Lefsetz or Steve Rennie. Blows. That sucks. That's fucking awesome. There is very little middle ground in their perception of stuff. And that's what, if you're an artist, that's what you're fighting against. Let me talk about another thing that comes to mind when we're talking about...
Let me just go back. Okay. I went to see a band. This is not a household name band, but this is a band, if you're paying attention, you know who they are. And I went to see them the other night. And I said, not only do they not play that well, the guy doesn't sing that well, and the songs are not that good. So there are people here, but try to spread it from these people to the other people, or you have artists and they go, well, you don't have a good voice. They go, well, Bob Dylan didn't have a good voice. Yes, but he was the best lyricist of all time. If you were the best lyricist of all time, we're going to compromise a few things.
Yeah. We had Nick Raphael. Do you know Nick Raphael?
Yeah.
That would be a great lunch, you two. He had a great comment here that it's about likability, it's about, having great songs, and it's, about all these different elements. But the point he was making is that there have been great singers that didn't become successful. There have been okay singers that became very successful because it's about great songs and it's about performing and so forth. So if just having a great voice was something, then everybody that sings in church could be a star, but it's not going to happen.
Well, the other thing I want to say, there's a Don Henley song from 1989. I think it was on the end of this Innocence album. It goes, "How bad do you want it? Not bad enough." Mm-hmm. So you have to want it that badly. However, I have to give the caveat. Sheer will and determination is just not enough. Find a way to channel it, okay? The great thing about today's marketplace is you can tell immediately. It's like Jerry Seinfeld talking about going to the supermarket, and he goes, "That's why they call it the checkout line. We're checking everybody out." We have people everywhere looking for women, okay? So it's such a touchy subject. I can't even talk, today's politically incorrect world, but that's basically from Jerry. We have people all day long looking for great stuff. We are dying to turn people on to it, okay? So you can write something, you can make it, and you can put it up on YouTube for free. Everybody's got a phone. Mm-hmm. If you have no views, you got to tell the 5 people your friends and your family, whose opinion is irrelevant, okay? But if you go back a week later, and there's still no views, that means it did not resonate with the public. Yeah. Therefore, you can say, "I love it, this is what I want to do," great, but don't say, "I deserve to be paid."
Yeah, I think it's true. In sports, you have a scoreboard at the end of the night, so you can give lots of opinions after you get the score, but the scorecard is there. And I think for lots of artists out there, I think they're reluctant to actually face up to the scorecard, but it's telling you something. Your mom and dad don't count. They're supposed to love you.
I was talking to someone, they were talking, Troy Carter, who's an African-American guy, and he's talking about the problems in the inner city. We were having a conversation last week, and he reinforces, how many people can play in the NBA? Okay? How many people can make hit music? Mm-hmm. Okay? It's not like we need millions of people. In addition, what people don't understand about the music business, because I'm sure some people watching this are not artists but want to be music business people, people are lining up to work for free, okay? And you can be a garbage man. Mm-hmm. Actually, some of those are unionized, not that easy to get that job. But they're not lining up to be garbage men.
No.
Honest profession, okay? No. So when you sit at home and go, "Oh, I know the charts, I know everybody," we know a million people like that.
Yeah.
It's like if you want to be a manager, first of all, it's a license to starve. You want to be a manager? Find a great act. Without a great act, you're irrelevant. Okay.
There's never been a guy who won the Kentucky Derby, right? They have to have a horse.
Exactly.
Right? That's the fucking problem.
Perfect
You need
example.
a fucking horse. Let's talk about something else, another interesting thing I think that needs to be part of the conversation about streaming music, which we're talking about, right? In the past, labels and artists lived or died by that single, right? So you could have 12 songs on your album, right? And it would be up to your manager, your label, somebody to go ahead and figure out what they thought the first single was going to be. And you take that single to radio. And if it worked, great, you got another crack. If it didn't work and you had a big time manager, big time lawyer, you might get a second crack. But if you whiffed on those, you were done, right? I want to show another quote from your Spotify US Top 50, which was in the last 3 weeks of your columns. That is called Funny Thing. Funny Thing. A funny thing, I love you're terrific here, Bob. A funny thing happened on the way to streaming. Acts became bigger than their singles. What we've learned is that if you've got the goods, which you were just talking about, the audience wants more than the single. You're only handcuffed by your ability to create great tracks. Now, as a former manager, right, I'd say that's one of the greatest things that happened at Spotify. It puts that consumer, the music user, the guy we're trying to sell, back in charge and allows him to go deeper and at his own pace. Thoughts?
Well, this is really a reaction to something else, which is a sinkhole I want to get into. The album. The reason we had albums was because of the physicality. Okay, so first we had, without going all the way back to wax cylinders and 78s, going to the modern era, which we basically put in 1964 with the Beatles. We had the 45 and we had the album. Okay, the album really could only hold about 40 minutes worth of music. There were occasional albums that were longer, but the sound would deteriorate. Okay, then we come out with a CD, which could hold almost 80 minutes of music. Never mind, only had one side, because if you had an LP, well, I don't like this side, I'll flip it over. And it was a well-known fact, the first track on the side, they would try to put a great track, okay? So, everyone looks to the past, and they believe that part of being an artist is making an album. No! This is not golf where there are 18 holes, okay?
Yeah.
It's about, you have to create the one track that gets your audience energized. Look, I want to separate from live business to recording, certainly on Spotify, okay? Because if you have a pure live act, it can be a little bit different. So you have to have that track. But what we have learned is if you have that track, like with The Weeknd, the track was Can't Feel My Face, okay? That got people so interested, they wanted more. And they're not going to a store to buy an album. They just want to play. If they like this, they like more. So people want more, but you have to hook them to begin with. And they don't see, well, I want 10 tracks and they have to be an hour. I mean, I believe if you're making an album, you want to make a concept album. You want to make Sgt. Pepper, Be My Guest. But
there were 10 great songs on that record.
Well, forget all that. No one's making a concept album. If you're at home today, make a single. If you got traction, people want, the corollary is, life is lonely and alienated. If you're a successful act, people will give you all of their money. Okay, I had this conversation with the manager the other night, and he manages a couple of acts which intentionally keep the ticket prices low. Okay, the point is, at this point, people don't care about low ticket prices. They want to pay, because when the ticket prices are low, the end result is they go to scalpers, get the tickets, and these same fans go to StubHub, and they'll pay $150 because they want to go. Same thing when you have acts bitching about recorded music revenue. Acts today, I'm talking about the thin layer of very successful acts, are making more money than they've ever made in the history of the music business.
Let's talk about why that is. I want to play it. Show that up there, Cody, or the slide. Our next one called Listens, okay? Because you bring up a great point, again, that gets lost. I'll set you up for this one, Bob. Right now, payments are relatively low, but they're going to grow as more people subscribe, and the winners get paid ad infinitum. As long as you're listening, they're making money. So it all comes down to the listens, whether it's the single or something else. When the artists complain they're broke, the truth is not many people are listening to them. Harsh reality, but true, right?
One of the
people aren't having a problem finding The Weeknd.
I got to remember, what's that? Amy Mann. I single these people out. Like I was singling out Tom Petty because he had a scorched earth publicity campaign a year ago for an album that no one listened to. And Keith Richards just did that in the last 6 weeks, okay? We have people like Amy Mann, who has a small coterie of devotees. I have no argument with that, okay? But you keep bitching that the system is against you. No, the system isn't against you. You just don't have that many fans.
Yeah. No, it's true. If you could fill up the forum, you'd fill it up. But if you can only fill out the Troubadour, it's a sold-out show, but it's not going to be a career maker. And this is where I sometimes think so many folks...
I'll give you a different example. I heard a song, there's a lot of backstory here, and then I discovered this act in Apple Music. We could talk about Apple Music, but I heard from the manager, and they sent me another track, this act, Bob Moses, okay? This track is good. It's from the new album, maybe out now. So I could tell my audience about that track, but I self-evaluate. I say, is that track so good that it's going to work for me or not work for me? Because I have to worry about my credibility, because if I tell a person, there's a email I get from England every day called Record of the Day. You have to pay for it. And they have a track every day. I never listen to that track. There's not enough good tracks. To have a track every
day.
day.
Yeah.
So if I'm recommending something, it's got to be either very interesting for a peculiar reason or of a certain level. Like I heard a track by Kurt Weill the other day, and I've been reading about it. Go, this is really a good track. Is it a good enough track that I should write about? Or the Don Henley album, there's a couple of tracks there. As I say, on some level, I'm self-editing, but on another level, I understand what the game is. There's a book coming out on October 5th called The Song Machine by this guy, John Seabrook, who's a writer for The New Yorker. And he talks about how these guys make the hit records. It's fascinating on a basic level, and they do the beats, and they get a top liner in, and they create the melody and the lyrics.
They're building a house, isn't it? And the guy, and Max Martin's a general contractor.
The fascinating thing is they work, and they go, if it's not a number one record, they scrap it completely, and the next day they start with a whole new track. They don't say, well, you know, it's really good, blah, blah, blah. Say, no, it's not as good as Umbrella. We're getting rid of it.
We have a question, Cody. I want you to go to Edgar Allan Poe's on that note, because I started reading the book. John Seabrook came by here a year and a half ago. He was introduced by Neil Jacobson, who I know you know. And so he sent me a free copy of the book. And I know from reading your column that you read 10 times more books than me. But it sounds like good. But here's a question regarding that whole notion of manufactured versus art. It's from one of our longtime members. It says, hello, Bob and Renne. I'm Chris from the Edgar Allan Poets. What I'm noticing in the music business today is that labels ramp behind the people that can create good social network noise. Most of the artists are doing crazy, stupid things, getting blah, blah, blah. That's not really important. So if tomorrow I decide to run naked in Hollywood with a crap sound, I have more chances of being noticed instead of writing a great song. Isn't that weird? The first goal of the labels is to make money, and I'm okay with that. But music is only a business. It's also art. Don't you think that we should go back to the art part of it, Bob?
There's so much stuff there.
And you have a little bit of artiste lover in you, I can tell from your column.
The thing is, if you ran naked down the street, no, people wouldn't pay attention. If we go back to the classic, there were turntable hits in the 60s and 70s. That meant radio played it, but no one bought it. Then we even had a couple of videos. This guy's, you know, I know this guy, what's his name, the famous DJ with the video with Christopher Walken. You know what I'm talking about. Whatever. It was a big hit video on MTV, and the record was a complete stiff, okay? So at this point in time, we've had videos. We have all kinds of people doing stunts where, a bad song. It's not successful. It sounds like an interesting thing, and we have a lot of people. Selena Gomez. You read about her every day in the gossip, assuming you're paying attention to the gossip, but on some level it's inescapable. So I'm pushing the buttons on the satellite. I hear a song. I'm driving in a very twisty road. I can't see who it is. So this is a great song. It's a Selena Gomez record. Now let's start to begin with. She didn't write it. She's not playing, but it's a great record. So if you're coming from the artiste level, you have to make a record that sounds that good. As far as, you got so many things going. The guy did say right there, yes, it's called the music business. The record companies will sell anything if it's sold. And they've done this. They sold Tiny Tim, sold a lot of crazy stuff, okay? But music does not drive the culture. We're in a fascinating situation where the people deep into music love it, and they think this is what's going on. It's so different from the 70s. You live in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
When you drove to drive in the 70s, you drive down Sunset Boulevard, and there were billboards for all the hit records. And now you go to a record company, they don't want to spend a dime. Okay, do it yourself. They have these billboards, which were proven not to actually move the needle. But you walk down and you go, something's going on here.
Yeah.
This is really something, okay? And we can go through the history, certainly in the 70s when music really drove the culture, never mind the 60s. If you want to know which way the wind blew, you turned on the radio. It wasn't Mr. American Idol, okay, where he's being a jive guy. The DJ was really your friend, Ryan Seacrest. And they had news appealing to you. They didn't have 22 minutes worth of commercial. Today's artists basically say, tell me what to do, I'll do it, okay? I'll change my look, I'll sing the songs you want, I'll co-write, et cetera, et cetera. Then the people with sour grapes are not as good as those people, But I have a real thought about this. In the 60s and 70s, when music blew up in America, England is a slightly different story because of the economics. I go into that, but most people listening are probably Americans. We had a
You'd be surprised.
We had a huge middle class. Middle class values are different from lower class values. Today, if you are middle class, upper class, whatever, you're not going into music. No one ever wanted their kid to go into the arts because they want their kid to survive when they're gone. But it used to be a reasonable thing. So if you go back to the 60s, you have Jefferson Airplane, up against the wall, motherfucker. They would say no. Neil Young's been interviewed by Howard Stern recently talking about, they were going to go on late night TV. I believe it was Steve Allen. Could have been the Tonight Show. He says, no, it's not our audience.
Yeah.
Today, it's a shopping center, it's
Everybody.
a mall, I'll show up, whatever. Because you have the lower classes. If you go back to Survivor in the year 2000, first big reality show. I know they were on MTV before, but this was on network. Everybody on that show thought they were a star. Tried to make it doing other things. They failed, but today, it's like Snooki and those people from the Jersey Shore. They know it's a lark. I'm going to go out, make some money, be famous, and then go back to Albany.
Yeah,
okay?
Go back to being a train wreck.
So therefore, until the example I use, this is 2.5 years ago, Jay-Z did an album with Samsung. Okay, Samsung paid $5 million so they could give away 1 million copies. And he said, isn't this a great victory? Okay, what do we know? Samsung has $1 billion advertising budget, so $5 million to them is nothing. Okay, but if Jay-Z had written an anti-Samsung song, well, hell, I don't have a problem with Samsung per se, but that's the power of an artist, to call it as I see it. Instead, we have all these artists saying, okay, oh man, life is tough. I got to make a deal with a corporation. We had a big lesson in the last 10 days. Volkswagen. These are people. These are the people you want to be in business with.
No.
The person at home, he's not getting any endorsements. You have to, if you want art to triumph, you have to be an artist. Artist has certain values, and as I say, all those people being artists at home, talk to anybody who ever worked at a record company and talk to them about the slush pile, the unsolicited tapes. Said, how often did you hear something good? Never!
Yeah.
Never. I want to go one step further, though. I don't answer my email unless I know you, because I've had 10% of the public is literally insane. You don't know which 10% it is. I've had a few bad experiences. See, so this is June, very end of May. A guy emails me, and he says, I met you. And the story he told, I could tell that he really met me, even though I didn't remember.
Didn't remember.
And he said, okay, I have an act, and I have a question for you. I'm going to put out the record independently, but there are a couple of A&R guys, they don't want me to put it out, but they don't want to sign it. So I emailed them back very specifically, unless they're going to pay, forget about it. And then I added a little fill-up at the end. But if the record's going to stiff anyway, the guy emails me back, he goes, oh, the record's not going to stiff. I said, oh, yeah. So he gives me the link to SoundCloud. And he says, this is the single. And I play it, I go, this is good, but it's not a hit single. Second track, second single. I said, wait a second. This is better than the first track. Now I have to craft an answer that he can't quote. Because if I say it's good, stay at it, he'll put it up on the fucking website. You can't say that. So I come up with some big equivocal response, like, I definitely hear something, I would continue to work on this. The guy was totally pissed. The guy emails me, goes, what the fuck, literally, what the fuck does that mean? But what he doesn't know, and I'm not going to mention these names, but I sent it to the chairman of one record company and a guy who's the number one A&R guy at the other record company. That was very late on the West Coast, close to midnight. I wake up. That record company chairman has already put it to their A&R guy. They said, Lefsetz was right. We hear it. They signed the act. Okay? So believe me, if you're that good, that has never happened to me before. Then the guy sent me another act to go, no, this isn't close. Okay? And I don't normally do that, but I was so excited. I said, wow. So if you are that good, people will hear it.
Yeah, and the truth is, not to piss on your recommendation, if you were an A&R guy, you'd have to do that 10 times a year, and you'd be lucky to get one of those 10 that got in the starting gates. Only one's going to win. Maybe two is going to win the race. Okay, let's take a couple of questions here from the chat. Our friend Ethan Bayer. We got a picture of Ethan? He was going to call in today, but, you know, we got a little bit of a late start and he had to take off. He is a smart guy, runs a website called edm.com, and here's his question. He goes, Bob, how do you see streaming changing the model for record labels and music royalties as well as for artists? And do you think it will have further reaching implications on music law and policy as a whole? I guess you're always a lawyer, but you started as a lawyer. You're not practicing, though. Thoughts?
Okay, I mean, there's a number of issues there. All of these streaming companies pay 70%, give or take 1 or 2%, to the rights holders. So I was out the other night, and there was an act playing. They have been on a label. They said, we're going it solo because we make some money on recordings, and we want all that money, which ends up being significant. And in their particular case, there were how much marketing results would they get from a label? So, in terms of changing I think underneath that is, if I have a deal with a major label, will I get a larger percentage of that 70%? That always comes down to leverage. In terms of being a music lawyer, that hasn't changed. Okay? So, if you have a music contract, if you are a lawyer representing an act, making a deal with a label, there's certain historical stuff that should be totally excluded. But the real story is record contracts are not about reality, they're about the dollar. There's discounts. In the old days, there were discounts for breakage, even though things didn't break.
File, right? Yeah.
They have discounts for artwork, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you may say, hey, I didn't really spend all that ripping me off. It's not about that stuff. It's about how much money we're making at the end. The way I look at this, okay, the way a record deal, they say don't go back.
Yeah, don't go back too far. Well, no, you got to, yeah, you're good.
Is the way a record deal works is you recoup. Let's just use, numbers, okay? They spend $1 million. They don't spend $1 million anymore, but the numbers work better this way. Okay, well, let's call it 100,000. You have 100,000, okay, and your royalty rate, it's the same 100,000 whether you're a superstar or a wannabe act. But because you have a superstar has a higher royalty rate, he recoups faster. It's the same cost. A dollar is a dollar.
Yeah.
So it's about whether the record company can make money. Okay, and we can look at some historical examples, like with the CD where they say take a reduced royalty, and then they ran to the bank. Okay, but at this point, there's nothing hidden. The most fascinating thing is that we can go on any site and see the raw data. It's like, you can buy some fake followers on Twitter, etc. But try to get an accurate royalty statement, doesn't happen.
I'll tell you from a longtime manager's perspective, and having worked at a label too, the reality is that record contracts are not designed to pay royalties. They're designed to recoup investment, right? And if we get through doing that and we have to pay you, all right, fair enough. And so that's why only the biggest of the big get over that number funny. Where they have to pay you. I mean, that's the reality. I hate to say it, but it's true.
I was sitting with Lucy.
Maybe that'll change.
I was sitting with Lucian Grange, who's chairman of Universal Music.
I know Lucy.
And he was talking about the artists complaining about the Spotify royalty rates. And he goes, 85% of my artists are unrecouped.
Well, that's the other.
If you're unrecouped, it doesn't matter what the rate is.
No, and it's funny, but I spend a lot of time bitching at record labels, but the truth is, it's not as great as it seems, because it's the fact is, it's the winners are paying for all the losers, not losers, people that managed to filter their way through all these curation systems, got in the Kentucky Derby, but only win, play, show, get the money, right? The rest are kind of also rans.
Well, a lot of interesting things there, because 10 years ago the thing was, okay, my hit record at the label is paying for all the stiffs. I'm not getting as much money as I think I should, so I'm going to go independent. One of the people who did this famously was Trent Reznor. He went independent. He goes, wow, I got to do all this work. I'm going back to the label.
Oh, fuck
and what's even funnier about that is he talked a lot of shit about his label, which was Interscope, and now he's in business with Jimmy.
Yeah,
that's how the music business
then he
works.
went to, it's, you know what, it's a lot, it's a complicated thing. Let's take, let's go change the subject here for a second here. You know, I'll skip this little topic on the disruption there, Cody. We're going to talk about it in a second. In the old days of the record business, right, when I started, the record label guys were the rock stars in the business, right? They were the guys that the answers, they were the ones that had the 2 secretaries and the guy waiting for them out there. In today's world, that's changing a bit, and I think a lot of it has to do with this collision or intersection, however you choose to frame it, of music and technology, right? Show me the clip from Eric Schmidt there. You wrote a piece it was called Eric Schmidt from Google. And the next generation of software, machine learning won't be just an add-on that improves performance in a few percent. It will really replace traditional approaches. To give you an example, a decade ago, to launch a digital music service, you probably would have enlisted a handful of elite tastemakers to pick the hottest new music. Today, you're better off building a smart system that can learn from the real world what actual listeners are most likely to like and help you predict who and where the next Adele might be. You are a fan of technology. I'll ask the question, do you think that the technology guys get the business today better than the music business guys?
There's a lot of stuff there.
There's been lots of people that played that theory out over the years.
Let's get back to that. Let's go back to the Eric Schmidt quote. If there's a great book called The Everything Store by Brad Stone about Amazon. So Amazon hired all these people to do all this editorial on books, trying to get people to buy more books. Once they employed algorithms, they sold more books. Algorithms said what to buy, okay? And they fired
based
all those
on your scorecard.
Right. And they fired all the editorial people. You can't argue with the data. What we've seen there with Eric Schmidt is, I believe, prior to reading what he was talking about machine learning, that the best person to recommend music is a person, because all I know is Pandora and all the algorithms. They are terrible, okay? Now, people don't understand 2 things about music recommendation. A, it's a profession. It's something you are actually skilled in. It's not something everybody can do. And today, when you recommend something, it doesn't matter that you like it. It matters that I like it. It's like when someone sends something, you've read enough stuff about what I like, send something you think that I'm gonna like. In addition, the hit to shit ratio has to be like 9 out of 10. This isn't like the old days when listening to KLOS. Well, I didn't like this, I didn't like this. Now if you don't like it, you immediately press the button. Yeah. So what do we know about the techies? The techies are willing to throw the old out. The only reason the music business has survived in its present fashion is because of the catalog, because they have the history of recorded music such that they leverage that with the rights people. So, yes, do I think Daniel Ek, do I think Sean Fanning know as much about music as the guy working at the record label? No. But they're willing to throw it all out and have a clean sheet. In addition, we're going to see a sea change because the baby boomers and Gen Xers running the music business are going to be gone, because no one wants to work in the music business. You know, it's funny, if you're watching this, it's like I get email all the time from people who go to these music business schools, okay? As I say, okay, you're aspiring to middle management, because the really smart people, they won't go to work because there's no room at the top. There's the guy who runs the label, and maybe 1 or 2 other old guys, and everybody else is working around the clock, and there's no upward mobility. Once we restructure the company such that there's upward mobility, I think it will be good. So the mentality of the techies will be good for the music business. But ultimately, it's art as opposed to business. It's a little different.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, you know, I believe in everything you're saying, because when you're talking about predicting what you might like, you're leaving a trail of crumbs along the way. Where I'll take issue with that comment a little bit is that, and with all of these tech guys who go the next step and say, I think it will predict a hit. Okay?
No.
I'm not sure that's true. It can tell you that there's buzz happening.
Let me tell you how that works with machine learning. Okay? I do not believe it will predict it. All that shit. I don't believe in testing records and all that other crazy shit. What Eric Schmidt is talking about is if you forget the playlists, which are really fucked up, especially on Apple Music, where I'm just making lists and lists. What they are saying, Eric Schmidt, is artificial intelligence will get so good that it will say, okay, the people who liked the 4 tracks you liked also like this track. So assuming you're not picking and choosing music yourself, we're not going to play that track, as opposed to someone who's independent of what all the. It's like, okay, if I like ACD, which I do, AC/DC Back in Black and Joni Mitchell Blue and The Weeknd. Everybody who listened to those 3 tracks, what did they play next?
Yeah,
I think there's an advantage.
Well,
in that.
Cody over here in the corner is become a big fan of Spotify's recommendation thing, and every once in a while, not every once, but pretty much every day, he'll be playing something in the background. I go, what's that? And it'll be some band I never heard of, some artist. And he'll tell me that he heard about it through Spotify. He uses one of those algorithms,
right,
I presume, as well. And that's good at identifying some of that stuff. Okay, we got another question. Let's change gears a little bit while we're talking on streaming services. Or streaming. Let's talk about streaming services here. We had a question from Maurizio that says, do you think...
How do you spell that?
Maurizio.
Maurizio. I know how to,
you must have been in Italy recently, Bob. Oh, there you have it. Okay. You go into the RenmanU, not one of those high-priced universities. They're going to give him a piece of paper, which Bob Lefsetz told you probably ain't going to get you anything.
I'll sign the diploma.
Yeah, me too. It says, do you think Apple Music will make a comeback, and do you think they can get it right after this crappy start?
Well, there's a lot of interesting things there, illustrating how crappy it is. A couple of days ago, they came up with how-to videos. Okay,
how to use it now?
Yeah, how to use Apple Music. Why weren't those videos launched in June? Who screwed up there?
Yeah.
Now, I know from talking to the rights holders that they're not about to extend Apple's free term. So they really can't compete with Spotify. So I believe that Apple Music subscription number, once the 90 days expires, will be horrific. But I also believe they're not going to tell us. They never told us how many watches they sold. They didn't tell us how many Apple TVs they sold. So it's like they're just going to declare victory and move on, which really is not that different from the music business.
Not that different from Donald Trump either. He declares victory at everything.
Well, as I say, Donald Trump, at least we have polls, okay? Yeah. Music business is about perception, not reality, okay? So it's about creating the illusion. It's like also talking to someone involved. Okay, what's her name? Taylor Swift gets all the hype. Katy Perry sold the same number of track equivalent albums. She's not out there making waves, okay, but in terms of raw royalties at a record company, it's equal. But the perception is that Taylor Swift is up here and she's saying whatever. So they're going to say that Apple Music was victorious. There's so much land yet to be grabbed that I'm not going to sit here and say who will end up with 70% of the market. What we've learned is there's one big winner. Google has 70% of search. There's Amazon. So I believe there won't be one big winner. I won't say that it can't be, should be Apple, but it's going to be a struggle. The other thing about it is, Spotify had a clean slate, whereas they tried to merge the MP3s with the streaming, made it incomprehensible. One of the things that frustrated me with Apple Music is, I have a 64 gig phone. I'm not going to buy a 128. I'm never going to get my money out of it, and I got to get a new phone every 2 years anyway. Maybe I may start getting a new phone every year with this Apple program. And I have many more tracks in my iTunes library than I can fit on my phone. And the way Apple Music works, it shows all the tracks. I mean, there's some tracks in my iTunes library that I played once I never want to hear again. And they're all there. I can't scroll through. That was incredibly frustrating. Finding them is even more difficult. I wrote about this. Someone says, well, there's a triangle. If you click on this triangle, which you would never click, it's right below, when you pull up that page, like right below artists or composers, whatever, you get a menu. And if you go back to the bottom of the menu, it says, only put music that's synced offline. It's like, how the hell would you know that?
Yeah, let me ask you. It's funny. I'm reading from on that story you wrote. You had a great comment. That's one about the functionality when you encounter disruption. You save your enterprise by building a cheaper, less profitable operation across the street, and eventually there comes a tipping. You don't mix them together. If you're trying to placate your old customers, you're screwing the new ones, and that's death. in your comment, my question is about leadership. Steve Jobs would have never done it. I know in the record business, leadership, the guys that are running those companies have a huge impact on the mentality. How much do you think the loss or the lack of Steve Jobs around has impacted Apple across the board when it comes to things that they used to kill?
No, Apple's done. Because how many bands have replaced their lead singer and gone on to victory?
Very few.
Van Halen. Genesis
had the guy in the band.
Okay, but as I said, they changed
Foo Fighters. Okay.
All these other bands where they lost the key player, the Doors, whatever, that was it.
Yeah.
So what do we know? Of the guys running the record companies today, 3 major labels, one is Doug Morris. If you go back to the 90s, late 80s, Doug Morris had a philosophy very different from Warner Brothers. He ran Atlantic. I have a crack promotion team. If I believe in the record, I'll say get it on a market in one area, okay? And if it reacts, we're going to go national. Meaning if people buy it, they go to the store and buy it. If they don't buy it, forget it. This guy then moved this philosophy ultimately across all of Warner Music and then into Universal, not a Sony. He knows what he's doing. I can also criticize Doug Morris, but he doesn't quite get the new paradigm, but he understands it. Okay, it's just like anybody, especially when it comes to art. There's always one guy who goes, no, that doesn't work. And you got to change the smallest thing that makes the difference. The thing about Steve Jobs is he understood how the one thing about Steve Jobs, which I love, if you have an Apple TV or whatever, the remote has almost no buttons on it. It's like, make it simple. I'm the type of guy who will dig in and find all that stuff. Most people won't, okay? So they created a music service with essentially a zillion buttons. Forget it.
Yeah, I was going to load it up, Bob, to get up to speed on it. And you know what? I read your column, read through it, and thought, fuck it, I'm just going to keep listening to Spotify because it is simple.
Exactly.
And in some ways is analogous to the way I discovered music back in high school. There was a guy who lived not too far from here, my old buddy named Mark Averbeck, who was the guy that bought every freaking album in the history of mankind. The only time I was ever arrested, I was with him as he was shoplifting a couple records in Westwood. I hope he's not watching today.
Well, did you get convicted? How'd you get out?
My mother came down and collected us at the back room of the college bookstore in Westwood. But it was the most funniest conversation. Well, I'll never forget this. I'll waste it. The picture of this is, hi, this is Officer Farrell from the LAPD. No, we're not going to take him to jail. No, we really need somebody to come down and pick him up. My mother was going to leave me in jail. Okay?
Well, that's the difference between yesterday and today. When I was growing up, if you came home with a note from the principal or your teacher, all hell would fucking break loose.
Fuck yeah.
But today it's like, we're going to go kick the ass of that principal, not my kid.
True. I'm going to just leave that one alone. It's funny how the kids all became the victims, man. The old days, they'd send you to the fucking closet. Go, Mr. Rennie, you go in the closet and think about that, right? Forget about coming out. I got to go in the closet. You think about that. I spent a lot of time in the fucking closet there going, wow, fuck, okay. I wonder when I get invited back to class. That was a cloakroom back in the day.
But by the same token, these are the same people making music.
Okay.
My mother thinks I'm the smartest person I know. It's like I'm a great talent.
Yeah.
Well, that's very different from the rest of the public.
Yeah, there's no baby on board signs back in those days. Okay, let's change the subject for a second. Bob, you got any questions in the chat room there, Ev? Or we're just talking too much. They're afraid of us, Bob,
Okay.
Well, I just asked that one, Ev. There's a second. Oh, there's a second. Oh, let's talk about this. It's a great lead-in to my next... I love it when these kids follow the program here. You do a column or some kind of arrangement with Rhino Records.
Right.
For all you folks that are living in a hole and don't know what Rhino Records, they made a career out of reissues, which I always thought was brilliant because you didn't have to talk to managers and lawyers and assholes asking you what you're going to do until they actually started signing some bands, and then they got over that. And it turns out, as I've watched and read your column over the years, that you have tons of bands that in common with me. And you and I got off to kind of a funny start here. But as I read your column, I remember you did a thing on Marshall Tucker Band at that shithole fucking place out in Burbank. What the fuck was it called? the Starlight fucking Bowl or something?
No. Yes.
Yes, you wrote about it. I'm thinking the only person I ever heard mention that place in my whole year was you. It turns out we were probably there at the same concert. So anyway, here's the question. This is from Rich. He says, what will bring rock and roll back?
Rock and roll is already back. They just call it country.
You know, it's funny. I'll agree with you again. When I want to listen to something that feels like rock, I put on Sirius Radio. I put on the country station, right?
I mean, as I say,
and it's like Lynyrd Skynyrd. It's like Marshall Tucker band, a little bit more countryed up, but fuck, those are rock bands.
Listen, I want to tell you because some of them have cheesy lyrics. Get the Eric Church live album, okay? It rocks as heavy as any rock and roll record. They got slide guitar, etc. So that's where it went in terms of traditional. The problem with rock and roll is you have to go back to 1969 and 70 when we had heavy metal, and that was Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath. I remember when people say, oh, Black Sabbath, that's too far out there, okay? Now when you listen to active rock, which is a radio format, if you're not into that music, you can't get it.
Hell, how about listen to a football game, a basketball game, and in every goddamn stadium they're playing Ozzy Osbourne. The train, what's that? The train song, whatever.
Crazy Train.
Crazy Train. Thank you very much. It's everywhere.
But the point is, the music is so far from the mainstream. What do we know about the Beatles? Not only did they look good, they wrote songs with choruses and bridges. And they had great voices. Why don't we start at that level?
Yeah.
Why don't we weed it? Like, we have the voice. No one's ever succeeded from the voice. We've proven a voice is not enough.
It has to be distinctive, and distinctive. When I think of all those great rock bands, and Jason Flom was talking about this, the bigger than life personalities, they exist today more in the hip hop world. You know, love or hate Kanye West, he certainly gets your attention. I understand he's running for president. That should be interesting. But those guys all had a distinctive voice. Mick Jagger, here 3 notes. Not the greatest singer in the world, greatest front man. I'll give him that, right? Robert Plant, heard him one time. You were in, okay? Freddie Mercury, Christ, they had Kanye West. Some kid put up a video of Kanye West covering, what was the song he was covering, Code? A Freddie Mercury song, and then they cut to Freddie Mercury, and I'm thinking, with the greatest respect to Kanye, you are no Freddie Mercury.
Right.
Okay? Those kind of big-time artists and big-time personalities
that's an excellent point.
Are gone. And so I sure as hope the fuck it comes back, And let me ask you a follow-up to that. When you listen to music today, the Max Martin stuff, which are perfect singles. I love Katy Perry songs. I admit it. I fucking love Lady Gaga songs. Everything's where they should be. Does that music, electronic music today, is evolving toward voice lyric with an electronic background? Does that music have the same staying power so that my 19-year-old son over there is listening to all the rock bands that I listened to when I was a kid? My oldest son is listening to the Allman Brothers live at Fillmore East. I know you listen to that one, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay?
Memory Elizabeth Reed.
They're doing it because it's hip. They're doing it because it's good. Will today's music stand the test of time?
There's a lot of stuff there. What we learned was most of the 90s have been, wiped out musically. They're talking about some 90s nostalgia now. I also believe, if you know your music history, we're presently in the era of 1960 to 64 before the Beatles blew it apart. They had the 4 seasons. I love the 4 seasons, okay? But the Beatles were something new. So when we go to some of these Max Martin tracks, okay, I think we're in a different era now with Max Martin, because if we go back 15 years, we have Backstreet Boys, Quit Playing Games with My Heart. That's a brilliant record whenever, okay? So some of these pop records, I believe, will sustain. As to whether the hip-hop records will sustain, some of the stuff is so basic. You got a good voice, you got a good lyric, you got a catchy tune, that survives, okay? Stuff that it goes from that paradigm. What you're really asking, the way I put it is, we lived through the Renaissance. If you look at the Renaissance in painting and sculpture, they've painted and sculpted since then, but there's only one Renaissance. So the classic rock era, there's only one classic rock era. We've been waiting for a new Dylan for 50 years. Did we ever get one? No. A new Beatles? No. So, yes, that is a killer era, but one thing Malcolm Gladwell wrote, he said 50 years from now, no one's going to know who Steve Jobs is. That's true. And what I've come to see is a lot of the bands I loved in the 60s and 70s, who literally were not the Beatles, okay, or the Stones, they've already kind of been plowed under. So I say, okay, the Beatles, they're going to get another 50 years. Are they going to get another 150 years? I'm not sure.
Yeah, well, you and I won't have to worry about that.
That's for sure.
Okay, one final. Well, I'm going to go spin to another one, a column that caught my eye for a couple reasons, and it was a column you did recently on Jerry Weintraub. For you folks that don't know Jerry Weintraub, he was one of the certified legendary manager promoters of his time, and the reason that article connected with me was because when I was a kid growing up here in Los Angeles, California, I caddied at a local golf club here called Hillcrest Country Club, which was a very private Jewish club and had tons of people.
Still
in the
is,
show.
right?
It still is, yeah. And I played over there a couple weeks ago, and had all kinds of successful showbiz types in there. And so whenever a new member would join the club, you would quickly get the skinny on what it is they did. Mark Bloom sold tires. This guy ran a studio. This guy was a director. And so when the dirt came back, it was Jerry Weintraub is the manager of Frank Sinatra and John Denver. Now, to give you the funny thing you'll appreciate, there were only two guys at Hillcrest Country Club, Frank Sinatra and Walter O'Malley, okay? Walter O'Malley was covering everybody on their Dodger ticks, and Frank was the fucking chairman of the board, right? And so when Jerry joined the club, it was my first kind of consciousness of music business, big-time manager, and what that meant. And ultimately, that played out for me to a much lesser degree. I can later remember going to the Management 3 offices in Beverly Hills, which for you folks that don't know is right next to the old CIA offices, and waiting in the office with Terry Bassett, who you might remember, who was going to give me my first job as a tour manager for a band called Fingerprints. Well, in the great showbiz tradition.
Fingerprints evolved into Silencers. I know.
Okay, but here's the rub. You'll love this, okay? I go there to get the gig, and I'm talking with Terry Bassett. Says, come back in a week. I think I'm the fucking tour manager. Two things happened. John Bonham drops dead. They were promoting a big Led Zeppelin tour. He goes, kid, I can't talk to you today. The drummer died, and I already knew that. He goes, but the other bad news is you're not going out on tour with that fucking band, right? So it's my introduction to the show business, right? So that was the connection to it.
Why weren't you going out with the band?
Because it turns out that they hired another guy who ultimately I worked with at Avalon Attractions, and I found out they hired him because I said, what was your first gig in the music business? He goes, I was the tour manager for Fingerprints. And I thought, are you fucking kidding me? It's killing me. So,
well, one more interrupting question. How good a golfer was Jerry?
Not good at all. He looked like he was chopping fucking wood. I mean, I'll be fucking honest, okay? Him and Sylvester Stallone looked like lumberjacks, okay? He joined the club because it was cool. I didn't see him play golf out there 2 times, right? And I worked in the bag room when you'd sling the bag out, so you knew who was showing up every day. Anyway, I digress, folks. Don't get me started on golf. My question is this. If he defined the old school mogo, you described him as a man amongst men, he could get anybody on the phone. Who are the moguls, the young moguls today that even hint of a Jerry Weintraub? Is it Scooter Braun? Is it Guy Oseary? Who are those guys out there today?
Certainly Irving Azoff, who's not a young guy.
No.
Same thing.
Yes.
Maybe
Titans.
Scooter Braun, maybe Troy Carter. But the problem is that type of person doesn't go into the music business. There's not enough money. Mm-hmm. Some of these people I don't necessarily cotton to personally, but there's a guy in the tech business, this guy Chris Sacca. Mm-hmm. We've had our ups and downs, but Chris Sacca is a billionaire. I knew him when he worked for Google. This is how many years ago? 7 years ago. He left Google and decided he's going to become a VC. Invested in everything from Kickstarter to Twitter, et cetera, and now he's a billionaire, okay? He's got a place at the Yellowstone Club. Those people don't go into music. The upside is not high enough.
It's so funny to hear you say that, right? Because, I've been really lucky, and I know it, right? And to have made a great living doing something that I arguably would have done for free, just like you mentioned, right? And yet I have 2 sons that are interested in going in the music business. And somebody asked me the other day, well, if you were starting all over today, Steve, what would you do? Would you go in the music business? I said, I don't think so. I might work in the music space, but I'd be much more interested in sitting down with my buddies coming up with some app over beers, like Evan Spiegel is worth $1.4 billion. Now he's worth $1.4 billion if they can cash this baby out. But the bottom line is, he's a rock star. He's 26 years old. Come on, the kid wouldn't even be ready to be a product manager at a fucking label these days, right? So it's a tough path out there, for these folks that are doing it. And the big scores, if you're interested in that, seem to be in the tech space where you're acting as gatekeeper, where you're the toll
I agree with everything you said.
And so
that's because when we grew up, music was everything. I thought you were going to reference Jerry Weintraub. One thing I remember about Jerry Weintraub was reading about him in the Sunday calendar section. I mean, I did this TV show for Mark Cuban with what's his name from Sugar Ray. Okay.
Mark McGrath,
who's really pretty hysterical. I like Mark. Okay. And then someone we're talking about that, he goes, the LA Times, it's a pamphlet. I go, that's perfect. For those of you who don't live in LA, this is one of the things I hate about these people, okay? They gotta preserve their margins. They don't give a shit about the customer. So the paper is so thin, everyone lets go, everyone unsubscribes. But there used to be a thick tabloid section every Sunday. Everybody read it religiously. Right? Everybody. I remember they're going on about Jerry Weintraub and how he was managing Dylan, told him what to wear, whatever. You lapped that stuff up like you lap up the Apple presentations today.
Yeah. We're going to wrap this up. The other thing that was striking about that article for me, and as I said, over the last couple of years, I read your columns, whenever they come through, and they come through pretty steadily. You started as a person, that loved music. You became a lawyer. You worked in the music management firm for a while. But at some point in the ball game, you must have made a decision, or something called you, says, my role might be better served as a commentator, as an observer, as somebody.
That's actually not how it went down, but that's okay.
Okay. Well, you can talk about how it actually went down. But my question was this, is that now that I've read your column so much, what I find is it's not just about music. It's about life. It's about dealing with fear and insecurity and paranoia and what I consider the three building blocks.
Wait, I want to remember these, the three building blocks.
Fear, insecurity, and paranoia. I call it the FIP factor, Bob.
Why are they the building blocks?
Because everybody's got it. It's only a matter of degree. The people that are working.
How did you come to this conclusion that everybody has it?
By being in the music business for 37 years.
Okay.
Do you think that Lucien Grange isn't worried about his fucking job at Universal? Maybe not now. Do you think he's not paranoid that somebody's submarine him? Do you think he's not fearful and wonders some days, do I have it? I've been the luckiest bastard in the world. It's not just the music, but I think that's part of life.
How old did you get till you realized that?
I'll tell you, I remember the first time I fucking heard the words out, it was from my lawyer, David Wahlberg, right? Who said, I've never seen a business built on fear and insecurity like this thing. And it was, I'll say it was at an Ozzy Osbourne concert that I was promoting in Bakersfield, California, where Sharon Osbourne was coming unhinged and made us unscrew the fucking mirror off the men's bathroom and bring it into the fucking goddamn dressing room for Ozzy Osbourne. And he was just noting it, the calamity and the chaos of it all, right? And so over time, I've seen it play out. I saw it play out with artists in particular who put their stuff out there for everybody to see in hopes that it might be accepted, and how painful it is when it isn't, right? So to bring this back to you, Bob, you air out a lot of your own personal stuff. You call it, you're not very socially good and so forth. And I want to play you or read a quote from your piece there that really kind of struck it for me again here. That last little bit from the Weintraub thing.
His mentor?
Yeah. No, one before that.
The Outsider?
Yeah. Okay. You talked about being at the funeral thing. It says, I'll be honest, I almost didn't go. How many people do I know? Irving and, Jerry Green was there, Joe Smith, and a lot of people you see on the screen who I recognize, but wouldn't dare to speak to. That's what happens when you're in between fame and famine, right? And that's what triggered that thought, that you're so honest about it. Would you care to expand on that a little bit? Is this business of Bob Lefsetz, is it part catharsis for you, Bob, as it is about the business? Honestly,
there's different levels. There's what was actually going on when I wrote that, and let me start there. Okay, I knew Jerry. Jerry wasn't my best friend. Okay, I wasn't in a particularly good mood before, and I went. Now, it's very interesting because the presentation aspect of that with Billy Crystal and Steven Soderbergh's movie was really very good. Okay, and I socialized with the people that I knew there, but I did read 2 days later, there was a dinner afterwards at Craig's. I wasn't invited to that dinner. Okay, they separate the men from the boys, but this is a really touchy thing, in that, yes, there's some great lyrics that I quote all the time. I mean, Jackson Browne, dreaming of the perfect love and holding it so far above that if you stumbled onto someone real, you'd never know. Okay? And there's Joni Mitchell, part of you comes out of me in these lines from time to time. Never mind, Bob Dylan, for them that obey authority, that they do not respect with any degree, who despise their jobs, their destinies, speaks jealously of them that are free, life sometimes must get lonely. So you read that great stuff. That's why we love those records. Very different from the pop records today, okay? Pete Townsend, A Little Is Enough. So you say, okay, I started to veer into that territory many decades ago, and people always love that stuff best. I'm being real honest here. Problem I have today is my audience is too large. And on some level, you do what you do for a while and you get known for a certain thing. So if I write something phenomenal, it doesn't matter what it's about. It could be about that curtain. But if it happens to be incredibly well written, fine. But I've been writing a long time. I'm never going to write something that's a 6. Okay, I'm basically hit 7 or 8 territory. So if you do something about the music business that's 7 or 8, that's one thing. If you do something about the curtain that's 7 or 8, people can say, hey, what the hell are you writing about? So what I've realized is people identify with the humanity, which has been pretty much squeezed out of art. It's not only music. Look at movies. They're basically superhero movies. There's nothing there, which is why people are drawn to television, because they do this stuff. So I really, it's a long story. Yes, it's harder to do that stuff because I have a lot of haters. That's one thing that if you don't have any haters, you don't have any level of success. I have people who email me every day that I'm a shithead, and I've never responded to them. Never. They send me 500 emails that I'm a shithead. It's like, I wouldn't send somebody one email, okay, period, if I didn't know them. So it's somewhat inhibiting, but when I do that, I try to get a kernel of truth that the great records had. So that's my motivation.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because so many times you're talking about your hemorrhoids and your bad back. I think you're talking to me, Bob. So fortunately for all you fucking youngsters out there, you don't have to worry about that. One final thing, before I do that, I want to say on next week's show, we talk a lot about mentors, and I was very lucky early on when we talked about Terry Bassett and so forth, to have some great mentors. And one of them was Terry Bassett, but one of my main mentors was a guy by the name of Brian Murphy, who is a big-time concert promoter for years, used to run Avalon Attractions, now works at AEG. I've talked about him countless times, folks. Next Wednesday, we're going to get a chance to meet Brian Murphy, and he can tell you why he decided to take a chance on this cocky little fuck from USC, who the first time I met him, I told him, I don't want to work at Avalon. I'm king of my own castle. The castle folded up shortly thereafter, and I joined the real castle. He'll be joining us here. Now, when I first had an issue with Bob, I used to think that you were really freaking cynical, and I have been cynical myself. And then over time, I started reading your column and so forth, and I thought in some ways that indie artists, that something of an outsider looking in, could find some common ground with you. I want to play that last little clip there of Bob, his mentor. And so for a grizzly old fuck, cynical fuck, you actually have some great moments of inspiration. This is again from that Jerry's More. It says, do what you do, folks, to the best of your ability. Try not to be someone you're not. Put one front of the other. Unafraid to play the game. And then if you're lucky, someone like Jerry will notice. Jerry noticed me and I still feel the halo today. Maybe it's not going to be Jerry Weintraub, but it'll be somebody. And that's the mission in life and in the music business too. Find advice. Anything you'd like to add to that, Bob? That was very poetic.
A lot of stuff there. One, I mean, I'm there. This is Jerry Weintraub's memorial. If you're watching live, this was Sunday night. couple of days ago, and I said, they're going on about what a great friend Jerry is and how he called. I know Jerry would reach out to me. I wasn't.
Irving's the same way. He'll call anybody back.
Exactly, absolutely. But what I mean is, I'm not either of those people. Okay, I'm not someone. Jerry used to call this guy every day at 6 a.m. Say, hey, it's your friend on the line. I don't call anybody at 6 a.m. I'm not up at 6 a.m., but I don't call anybody on a regular basis. So I'm sitting there and I say, I can't be any of these people. On some level, I'm envious, whatever, but I can't be. The one thing I can do is write. So I better continue to do that. Because if I try to do what they do, I'm not going to win.
Well, you know what I'll say? The music business has got all kinds of great characters in the business, you know, and everybody has a role to play, right? And I've grown to admire your role, Lefsetz, even if I'm saying that, not that we agree on everything, because there are lots of things I think, you know, you're fucking might be missing the boat on. But I've come to appreciate your, you do your homework, you give a thoughtful analysis, even if it might be misguided from time to time. And it provides something to talk about in the business where everybody can have an opinion. I appreciate and always hang out with people that have opinions, even if I don't agree. So I want to thank you for joining us here again today.
Absolutely,
and, I'll see you at our next barbecue. All right, that's it. But I'm going to let you take us away today since none of my tricks are working today over here. One of those days. I'm Steve Rennie. I'm the Renman. This is Renman Live. We'll see you next Wednesday. Thanks for joining us.
You'll never know when your great moment to shine will come. But when it does come, you'll need to be ready. So start planning and preparing right now.